Good morning, everyone. So compared to the other two keynote speaks, he's going to have a bit more of a crusty, Wall Street type of a flavor to it. That's because I spent 20 years in banking before I became a consultant, right? So, after 20 years in banking, now I'm a consultant at Booz Allen, and there are a number of things that are different about working in a bank versus working in a consulting organization. At some point, and if any of you want to talk about that, I'm happy to kind of share those experiences. But one of the most interesting things is when you're a consultant, you're on the road a lot, right? So, for example, this last 3 weeks, I think I go home for the weekend, do my laundry, and I'm off on the road again. And one of the interesting things that have struck me is just the amount of free data that you have at your fingertips that let you make the most of your trips, right? So, for example, when I'm going to a remote city, right? Now next week, for example, I'm going to be starting my week off in Nevada, in Las Vegas, finishing my week in Chicago, and then coming home back to New York. And, just knowing kind of what the weather is in those cities, right? So I can plan my clothing, figuring out, where I'm going to take my clients out for dinner, right? And even simple things like, when I'm rushing to get to the airport, should I take a train? Should I take a taxi, right? And if I'm driving, what's the best way to get me to the airport? Just the amount of free data that's available for us on a day-to-day basis is just mind-boggling when you kind of think back to where you were like 5-6 years ago when you didn't have all this free data. Now it's interesting. Oops, is this working? Oh, yeah, it's interesting because this availability of free data is actually putting a lot of pressure on data sciences organizations, right, and IT organizations. So there's a question, right, that I've heard myself when I worked in banks, and now I'm a consultant. I hear people asking my clients when they are saying, guys, look, I'm giving you, and Wall Street IT budgets are like hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So I'm giving you all this money in your IT budget, right? And yet I can't get to the insight that I seek when I have all this information available at my fingertips, essentially for free. And so And then, of course, the other interesting thing is you've all seen various versions of this, right? When just the amount of tools you have at your fingertips can be quite dizzying and mind-boggling. And you have a parade of vendors, who are going to come through the organization saying, here's another tool that will solve your problem, right? And we even have cases where, you'll have the CEO of a company that sits on the board with the CEO of a bank. And they'll have dinner one day, and then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, as the IT guy, you have to go implement another tool, right? So this whole environment and this landscape of tools is kind of mind-boggling, dizzying, and it's sometimes very difficult for a data scientist or a technologist to kind of grok and work with. And then, of course, you've probably seen versions of this, right? So there's a whole suite of standard mathematical techniques that you have that you can apply to your data to get the insights you want out of it. And at any given time, figuring out which one of these do I use, right? And when, that's also another challenge that faces today's data scientists when you've been tasked with all the hype around the environment and you've been tasked to glean insights from all this data that you have, right? There's like one more thing that you have to kind of be worried about or concerned about or be thinking about. And then, there's all the data, right? And the expectations with regards to, the kind of promise of, the volume, variety, velocity aspect of it, right? And then just knowing that there's all this data that's available and constantly being asked by your management, by your clients, to glean new insights, combining all these sources of data, right? So then that's another challenge that is facing today's data scientists. So all in all, I think what I'm trying to say. There's one more point, right? So you get through all this and you think you're going to you think there are a couple of problems you can solve. You think there are a couple of insights you can glean, right? And when you're there, then here comes the CISO or here comes the Chief Privacy Officer, and they go, whoa, wait a second, right? You can't do anything with that data. You're not going to be violating this privacy requirement, right? Or the CISO comes and says, whoa, what are you doing? these are customer data, these are our client data, you can't use it in this fashion, right? And then here's the business on one side that's, asking you to rapidly produce insights, right? And then they're asking, like, how much money do you need? How much, infrastructure do you need? How much consulting dollars do you need? And then on the other side, here's the CISO and the private service saying, I can't, we can't make the news, right? Stop what you're doing, pause, right? So you have to kind of balance that as well. So net, it can be very, very dizzying to be in this business right now. And so a bit of a mea culpa, so when I played leadership roles, on the street, and then as I became a consultant and I'm helping my clients, these are the types of questions that we are kind of grappling with, right? So, like people ask, like, do we need a data science program, right? And then the question is kind of, where do we start, right? And then it's like, do we already have one, right? And then, then all of a sudden, your CIO comes and says, hey, you can hire 10 people, right? Go start building a data science program, right? Then kind of where do you kind of start looking at the right staff? And then, going back to what the CISO was saying and what the chief privacy officer was saying, how can we do all this? How can we get all the insights we need and still not get us or the company in trouble? And then, every once in a while, people wonder, hey, like, what if I just, go buy a Hadoop cluster, right? I put some, analytic tools on it. Can I just tell my management that I now have a big data program, right? Because, management is saying you need to have a big data program up and running. So with all this going on, we've, and I'll tell you a couple of stories about this in a second. We find, I don't know if what your experience has been, but sometimes we find organizations that are kind of stuck and stymied, and they don't know where to start, right? Because there's just like so much going on right now, and there's like so much pressure and so many places that you could kind of start from. So my whole presentation is about a little tool that we came up with. It's a bit of a mouthful. It's not easy to say it, but we call it the IVADS PS framework. That enables us, to kind of figure out kind of where to start, right? It's a tool that enables us to figure out where to start, give us a bit of a roadmap on how to move our program forward. It's also a tool that lets organizations, as well as technologists, kind of communicate with their management on what they're doing and where they want to invest and how they're kind of moving the agenda forward overall. So the framework itself, what it stands for, and this is all kind of, pretty simple motherhood and apple pie type of stuff, right? So first of all is the insights, kind of knowing what questions am I going to ask the data, right? Like, why am I doing this, and what insights am I trying to glean? And then having the right, business analysts on your team to be able to kind of figure that piece out, right? And then with visualization, so it's IVADS, right? So the V's of visualization. And that's, figuring out kind of what tools, techniques do I use to actually display this data in a meaningful way to my constituents. Then the analytics piece is that's the A, and that stands for the mathematical techniques I would use. So remember that kind of chart of confusion that I showed, and just knowing, kind of what mathematical technique do I use, and also what mathematician do I employ at any given time. And then there's the data piece, which is the D, which is the kind of what core data do I pull into my data sources to be able to answer all the questions. And then S is for the systems, right? So what technologies do I use? Like going back to the chart that I showed earlier, right? Do I go to the cloud? Do I stay local? Do I go with Hadoop? Do I do something else? Do I go with standard warehousing techniques, right? So that's the S piece. Now, the PS piece is to say, PS, don't forget about privacy and security. And making sure that you bake it in to the whole project, the whole life cycle, the whole evolution of your data sciences program. And so with that, I'm going to walk you guys through a bit of an example of how we helped one of our clients overcome some of these barriers and actually get true value out of their data. So here's kind of the client story, right? So this particular client is in the loan business. It's a financial services client, and they have so over time they've gone through some acquisitions, and they have these silos of data that correspond to the full life cycle of a loan, right? So when you're getting a loan, you go through origination, right? You get a loan, and then the loan goes to a servicing period, right, where you're paying, like think of your home mortgage, for example, right? And then if you don't pay, it goes into default. And so this client had this phenomenal data sources, right, that they had access to. And the other interesting thing is, I don't know, I think most of you are in the scientific community, so you're probably not as locked into mainframes as those of us further south from you are. But they had a lot of their data sitting in vSAM mainframe databases, which were difficult to harvest. And the other interesting thing was, they had spent a lot of money up to that point, right? Year over year, investing in complex, ETL processes. And the fascinating thing was, they were always 25% behind, right? So what happened is the operational data would, evolve over time. They would have it downstreamed into their reporting warehouses and marts. But they could never keep up because of that complex ETL process. So they could never really report on all the data that they had available to themselves. And so here's kind of where the CIO, and actually we were, for this particular case, we were engaged by the CEO of the firm. So the CEO was saying, like, oh my goodness, we know that we are sitting on a gold mine of data, right? And so what they're saying was like, look, what if we could have unfettered access, immediate unfettered access to all our data, right? What if we could actually join across, origination, servicing, and default, right? What if we could look at the patterns that we see during origination and be able to accurately predict default, right? So what loans to avoid, right? What if we could look at servicing and looking at certain delinquency patterns in people paying their loans off and knowing this particular loan is just not good for us. We should just sell it off to someone else, right? And also, what if we could actually take this data, right, and link it with external data sources, external public geospatial type data sources, right? And glean additional insights out of that. And so the whole problem that they were having though was, they didn't have this approach of being able to kind of be nimble and fail rapidly, right? So here's kind of how, here's what the thinking was. So they thought that, it seemed like a NoSQL solution would probably work, right? Now they had several impediments to overcome. So one was cultural, right? Because culturally they are like an old, mainframe-based banking company. And the other challenge that they had was, since it's loan data, right, and it has people type information in it, the moment they try to do anything, they get the privacy officer walking down, knocking on their door, saying like, what are you doing, right? They didn't have much knowledge with big data type solutions, up to that point. And they hadn't really invested in mathematicians per se, right? So they didn't have the people who had the right mathematical skill sets to come and be able to kind of quickly start looking at data and running, ad hoc analysis on this and trying to figure out, how to glean some insights out of it, right? So what they wanted to do was, they wanted to start somewhere, right? They didn't know where to start with this. And they wanted to kind of rapidly, make iterative progress. But the most important thing was, they wanted to be able to show progress and results to some impatient investors and senior management in the firm, right? Because they were saying, look, after investing all this money, we still can't get to our data, kind of what's going on here. So here's how we applied the framework, right? We had to figure out kind of where to start, right? So we said, let's first, get a Hadoop cluster up and running. Let's build a stack in your environment, right? And so we had worked through that. We got it up and running, right? And then we said, look, let's start somewhere. Let's get some of the data, right, that we could immediately show insights from, right? So we got some of that data in, and then we started gleaning insights. So when we started showing some of these insights, right, then the business folks realized, like, oh my goodness, there is something real here. And then they went off and they came back with more analytics that they want us to generate, right? So we did that. And then once we started getting some of those analytics, they said, okay, well, now we have to really get this into an investor-friendly format, right? Or a management-friendly format. So then we took a pause and looked at what visualization techniques we had to apply to it. And then, so as you can see, we kind of started going round and round the loop. The other part that we also did was we want to make sure that that privacy and security were not afterthoughts, right? That they were kind of baked into every part of or every step we took. So we had, the chief privacy officers and her representative, as well as the chief security officer and his representative, actively involved in the process as we went forward, kind of step by step. And so net, so what did happen to this client was, as a result of this, they actually got some of those insights. They got more funding, and they got to a point where they could actually monetize some of that data, and really use it on a day-to-day basis, and get value out of their investment. So it was pretty good story overall. So that being said, we are also saying that we are not going to be abandoning some of the kind of well-known truisms that have kind of been in the industry for a while, right? That you still need these three basic areas of domain expertise, computer science, and mathematical and statistical skills to make this successful, right? We are nowhere are we saying abandon any of that, and also that you have to kind of mature your program over time, right? So you still have to kind of take that along as well. But what we are saying is, we have a way to kind of use this IVADS PS framework to rapidly and kind of iteratively move your program along. So that's pretty much it. I just want to kind of share that framework with you, and if you have any questions or feedback, I'm happy to hear it. Sure, go ahead. I'll take my one question here.
Talked about hiring mathematicians, data visualization experts. That's a hard thing to do for most companies. Are there any ways to short-circuit that, or to do it, with a small team?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because and I struggled with this when I ran teams in banks, and I now struggle with this, as a consultant managing consulting teams, right? And it's just couple of things. One is being able to kind of find things that will keep them interested, right? Because if you're a mathematician, you want to be able to constantly learning things, applying new mathematical techniques, and gleaning insights out of that data, and that's what excites them. And then reaching to that and knowing kind of where do you do that versus where do you hire a computer scientist to kind of take what has been discovered and put into production, right? So you kind of keep both people satisfied. Visualization is also a tough one, because it's kind of the same thing, right? Because the people who do the most brilliant visualization are highly creative people who get bored very easily, to be honest, right? So knowing to kind of pick the folks with those skill sets and be able to grow them and be able to leverage them across an organization and be able to kind of have more problems that then they can solve. That's kind of how you hire and retain those folks. And, at least in the banking industry, the people who do that really well are tremendously valued. Yeah. Cool.
It's kind of refreshing that you, of all our speakers so far, have approached it from a systems first aspect. Everyone else always said you had to start with the business question. And so I would be interested to hear how do you ensure that you're building your systems first, at least in the initial phase. How do you align those systems with your business questions before you even talk to your business users?
Yeah, it's a great it's a great question. So it's a two-part answer. The first part of the answer is the way you go through the framework depends on the particular problem you have, right? So there are some cases where you actually do have to go through and kind of figure out what insights are gleaning and whatnot. In this case, in the case of this particular client, they had an idea of what they wanted, right? And it kind of felt right, if you know what I mean. That's the only answer I can give. It just kind of felt right, and the way we did was it's kind of move incrementally, right? So we didn't go off and spend millions of dollars, kind of investing in a massive Hadoop infrastructure, right? It was get a small installation up and running, right? Just enough to show that with Hadoop you can actually bring data from a variety of different sources in a variety of different formats and link across them, right? And just being able to do what you were saying earlier, being able to link between. So the aha moment for the COO of this particular firm was when he showed him for the first time ever, right, in the 25 years that they've been doing this business, that you could actually, easily link all the data that they had on a customer across origination, servicing, and default. So we had to kind of prove to them that they could do that, which is why we started with the systems perspective. And then from there on, it was like off to the races, right? Cool. Very good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your attention. Thank you.